Governor DeSantis, great to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
Well, let's start with state of the race. Here we are, Iowa. We're in that last month here. What is your sense here? Because Kim Reynolds, the governor, has endorsed you. Normally, that would be a big deal. You've got to kind of fight through the Trump situation. What's that been like? Tell us a little bit about Iowa.
Well, it's been really helpful on the ground. So, the caucus is different than a normal primary. It's like you can't just mail a ballot in or just check a box. You're there. It's a commitment. So we get people to commit to caucus, and we have more of those people lined up than anyone's had at this point in the process. Governor Reynolds' endorsement helped us. We also got endorsed by Bob Vander Plaats, the head of the family leader, really has a pipeline into the faith community. And so we're galvanizing that support. But, the thing about an Iowa caucus, you show up, you talk to people, listen to them, answer their questions. That goes a long way. I'm willing to do that. Not every other candidate is.
Let's talk about Bob Vander Plaats for a second. That leads me into the evangelical vote. Obviously crucial in Iowa. What are you doing? What is the campaign doing to kind of reach out to that vote?
Well, I think part of it is just showing my record. I'm somebody that doesn't just talk the talk, because everyone comes here every presidential cycle and says a lot of the same things, but I've actually delivered. Of course, delivering on the life issue and being standing firm for a culture of life, but also delivering on protecting our kids. Being able to stare down the strongest company in my state, Disney, to say, you know what, we are not going to permit the sexualization of our kids, particularly our elementary school. I got a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. My wife and I are very sensitive to this. Kids should be able to go to school, watch cartoons, just be kids without having an agenda shoved down their throat. So on all these issues, people have seen, not only have I said what they want to hear, I've done what they want to see done, and I would take that to the White House.
Another state of the race question, Nikki Haley. Obviously, she's done well. She's surging. Her numbers have gone up. How do you see the contours between you and Nikki Haley, kind of, let's be honest, in a battle to get in that second spot to take on Trump? It's like the NCAA tournament here.
Well, look, she's not going to be able to win Iowa. I can.
Why is that?
And the reason is because you have to appeal to core Republicans and conservatives. And I think she's appealing to people who, it's important to appeal to everybody, but once it gets into the core conservative vote, that's where she doesn't get traction, because I think she really represents more of the old establishment type of thinking. She's getting support from a lot of liberal Democrat donors in Silicon Valley, Wall Street bank CEOs rallying liberal Democrats. I didn't know this until this campaign, she has attributed running for office and the inspiration not to Ronald Reagan or Margaret Thatcher, but to Hillary Clinton. And I think you see a lot of those similarities there. That's just not where our voters are. They want somebody that's going to fight. They don't want to see somebody caving to big corporations. They don't want to see somebody caving to the left. We have a situation, the left is dominating every institution in this society. And what guy running for president has actually stood in the breach and beat the left? Me. We beat, of course, Disney on the kids. We beat the teachers union on getting universal school choice. I beat George Soros on getting rid of some of these radical left-wing prosecutors, and we even beat the Democrats on election integrity to ensure voter ID and no mass mailing of ballots and ballot harvesting. So I have a record of delivering on issues that conservatives care about in ways that are second to none.
Nikki has hit you just yesterday about this Tom Massie thing in Iowa. You want to respond to that? I mean, Massie did vote against the anti-Semitism resolution you were campaigning with.
Well, what Thomas has said, and I've known him for a long time, he votes against every foreign issue. He's more of an isolationist. And he said, Ron DeSantis doesn't agree with me on all that stuff, but we do agree on other issues. And so one of the things he was highlighting was, he acknowledged my strong support for Israel, and that's been unshakable. Interesting, even if you go back and watch Ambassador David Friedman on moving the embassy, I was the one congressman that he singled out for praise, because at the time I was agitating to move the embassy. And of course, we've done a lot in Florida, including most recently rescuing over 700 Americans from Israel back to the United States who Joe Biden had stranded after the Hamas attacks. But what Thomas was pointing out was he was attacked when COVID hit because he actually objected to printing trillions of dollars in the middle of the night, basically, because he said inflation was going to happen, people were going to be paid not to work, it wouldn't end well for our country. Trump really attacked him for it. Trump tried to run him out of the Republican Party, and he tells the story, I was the one elected official in this country that picked up the phone and called him. And I said, listen, I know you're taking flack because I'm taking flack in Florida for bucking the trend, but 2 years down the road, people are going to look and they're going to say you did the right thing. And I think that he did do the right thing. And we just have to look like where our country is today. Part of the reason we're struggling with high prices, with the inflation, with all this stuff, goes back to the mishandling of COVID and the printing of all that money over 2 successive administrations.
Yeah, on Israel, you talked about that for a brief moment. There's a lot of anti-Zionism out there. Do you see anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism? Because if you're denying that the Jewish state, in essence, belongs to that Judeo-Samaria area, wouldn't that be, in essence, somewhat of an anti-Semitic position? How do you see anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism? Are they one and the same?
That's how we've defined it in Florida. So like I did a bill to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses way back in 2019, and we made that same point. I mean, look, if Israel's the only country you're singling out, you only care about the world's only Jewish state, you're not singling out any of these other, and you're acting like that, that is a telltale sign that this is the case. And I think it's important that we get the history right. When I see some of these imbeciles on college campuses saying Israel's a colonial power, excuse me, Judea and Samaria, those go back to biblical times. Those are ancient Jewish lands. The connection of the Jewish people to those lands go back thousands and thousands of years. They're not interlopers. That was their land that they got pushed away from. And so when they say that Judea and Samaria are, quote, occupied, that is wrong. They are disputed territories, but they are not occupied territories. And people forget the Arabs had a partition plan they could have accepted in the late 1940s. They rejected it. They went to war against Israel. They lost. They lost in 67. They lost in 73. These intifadas failed. So what? You lose wars when you could have had land and somehow you're still entitled? No. Israel has the best claim of right on Judea and Samaria of anyone in the world.
Let me talk about Donald Trump for a second. How do you get past him? He has this Teflon quality. How do you see him in the state of the Republican Party today? Because he does seem to have staying power. The more indictments he gets, the stronger he gets. Quite frankly, even if he's convicted, my guess is his poll numbers will go up.
Well, here's the thing. I think the Democrats, by targeting him on these things, cases, I think that they knew he'd get sympathy from Republicans. The problem is, if he's the nominee, how that picture looks, because I think they're going to really turn the screws and do it in a way that's going to probably turn off independent voters. So I think the Democrats have planned this out. So what I would say is if you're upset about how Donald Trump's been treated, and obviously you can go back to the Russia collusion hoax to see how the government has misused power, and I called that out from the beginning. How do you actually address the problem? And that's by nominating a guy like me who will actually be able to win and then make these changes that we all want to see. I also think that Trump does obviously have a certain segment that's very strong. A lot of these people, though, that come up in these polls, a lot of them are soft. I mean, they remember him, they liked his policies, but they are willing to vote for somebody else. So what we find when we're in Iowa, when I get people together, we do the spiel, we answer questions. The number one thing I get when people come up to me is, all right, you flipped me. I was going to do Trump, now I'm with you. So they don't dislike Trump, but when they see what we offer, they understand, hey, wait a minute, this guy can serve, Governor DeSantis can serve 2 terms. It's hard to do it in just 1 4-year term. I mean, Trump got a lot of good policies in, and then Biden reversed them all on day 1. I think you need a 2-term president to be able to have staying power. I also think the Supreme Court, we're not talking about it as much in 24 as we did in 16 because, of course, the passing of Justice Scalia left open a seat. But the next president may have to be called upon to replace Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. Those are the 2 best conservative justices on the court, and those are 2 of the best of all time. And if you look at Trump's appointments of people like Brett Kavanaugh, they're good judges, but if he appointed similar to replace Thomas and Alito, that would actually move the court to the left. And I think it's important that we have somebody like me who's really grounded in the constitutional theories and understands that to say, okay, we're going to appoint justices in the mold of Justices Thomas and Alito.
You've been hit by the Magum movement because a lot of them don't like you because they say you should have waited and let Trump run. If not unopposed, you definitely should not have run. What do you say to those folks who say, you shouldn't have run because it's not about loyalty to Trump, but there was this idea that there was a lot of unfinished business in 2020, plus a weaponization of government, and to stand in solidarity with him.
Well, it's a republic. It's not a monarchy. Everyone has a right to be able to run. I noticed they don't say the same thing about Nikki Haley. He appointed Nikki Haley to his own administration in the UN. Do you ever hear that argument made? His own vice president was running again. Did you ever hear that argument? The only reason they criticize me is because they're concerned that I represent a threat. Everyone has a right to go out there. I look at myself and I say a lot of the people that have started to run and are now dropped off, I didn't think could win the primary. Obviously, Trump could win the primary. I'm not convinced he can win the general. I can. But most importantly, get all this done. You're right. There was a lot of unfinished business because most of those core promises, from building the wall to draining the swamp to holding Hillary accountable, those promises weren't fulfilled. I'll be able to get those things done, but you have every right to run. And I have the ability, or I have the record, I've delivered on America First principles more than any other elected Republican in the country. If you look across the board of what we did in Florida, 100% of what I promised we would do, we delivered. If you look at the left, that's such a threat to this country, nobody has defeated the left more thoroughly and convincingly across a wide range of issues than me. That's what we need from the next president.
I know you're not a big fan of process questions and you want to get into substance, but a quick process question, the whole Jeff Rowe thing, never back down pact. You may say voters don't care about it. That's fine. That's fair. But there is something to be said about what is going on in terms of how that's been run, and are you disappointed in all of some of the headlines that the media has gone with here?
Yeah, people don't care about the process.
No, they don't.
And on a PAC, as you know, those are separate. So I have no involvement in that. I mean, I wish I could control all this. I don't. You control your own campaign. All that stuff operates in a separate legal environment and whatnot. So I don't have visibility into what went on there. Obviously, you've seen that there have been changes. I can just tell you what I've seen on the ground that they've done in terms of building a ground game and an infrastructure has been very impressive, and I've been satisfied when I've seen what they've done here.
Quick other Trump question. He said recently about illegal immigration, not legal immigration, illegal immigration, about poisoning the blood, and he's gotten a lot of pushback on that. I want to get your reaction to those words that he used.
Well, here's the thing. I think the border is a total disaster. I think when you have millions and millions of people coming like this, it's been a disaster. There's a lot of people from countries that don't mean us well that are coming, from Iran, from Russia, from China. It's a security threat. I think the chance of having a terrorist attack is very, very high. There's criminal aliens. This is a great issue for us to use against Biden because this is one of the biggest presidential failures of our lifetime. When you start talking about using those types of terms, I don't think that helps us move the ball forward. I would not put it in those terms. I think illegal immigration has been very harmful. And even I would say, although obviously there's a role for legal immigration, but if you look at what's happened in Europe, having massive numbers of people come, even if it's legal, if they're not assimilating, that's been a big problem in Europe, and we've got to watch out for that too. So I want to stop the invasion at the border 100%, but then legal immigration should really only be for people that buy into our core values as a country and that actually want to assimilate into American society.
On abortion, the Texas case, I don't know if you've seen that, obviously you have. What needs to be done in those situations? I mean, you've got a Texas Supreme Court that stepped in and basically said, you can't go out of state, but she did go out of state. How do you handle those type of situations?
Well, I think one, we just have to handle these situations with a lot of compassion because these are difficult situations. Mm-hmm. These are not things that you would want to wish on anybody. I know different states have handled it differently. Mm-hmm. In the state of Florida, our legislature put on my desk a heartbeat bill that protected unborn when there's a detectable heartbeat. They did provide exceptions for some of those real extreme cases, and so those exceptions are in law in the state of Florida. I know other states have done similar, and then states like Texas may have not have done it, but ultimately that's something that you got to work with legislatures on.
On Ukraine, you said today, we were there earlier, you had talked about possibly Nikki Haley, you're concerned about maybe her having boots on the ground in Ukraine. She said the other day that she doesn't want boots on the ground. She's not going to do that. And
here's the problem. Here's the problem, though. When we get into these things where there's kind of an escalation, first you're sending money, then you're sending this, then you're sending military advisors. I just think the danger is that it could escalate in a way that would draw us in. Because right now, you basically have a stalemate. There's no clear path to victory for either side. Obviously, a lot of people are dying. A lot of the money that's been sent over there has not even been for military purpose. It's been to like pay salaries for bureaucrats and pensions for Ukrainian bureaucrats. I don't think most Americans think that that's a good use. But I think the larger question, apart from even Ukraine, is, I'm the only military veteran running for president. I'll be the first president elected since 1988 that served in a foreign war, and having served in Iraq, that does color how I see the use of American military force. I think we've gotten into situations in the last 20 years where our troops have been deployed without a clear mandate, a clear conception of victory. And so some of these conflicts have drawn on. What I would say is, if you're going to use military force, it's got to be for a vital interest. You got to have a clear conception of victory. You got to give the troops everything they need to achieve it. And then once they do, you bring them home with mission accomplished.
The final question on the direction of the Republican Party. It's more than a populist strain. It is very populist today. Donald Trump obviously contributing to that mightily. So how do you see the Republican Party? Because let's be honest, people are being called rhinos today that 10, 15 years ago, they would not have been called rhinos. But today, the goalposts have moved, or at least it seems that way. What's your view?
Well, I think there's two things. I think that there's some of these guys that are like online that will call people rhinos purely based on whether they're endorsing Trump or not. So you can have somebody like a Congressman Chip Roy from Texas who supported me. He's the gold standard for conservative leadership. And sometimes people say he's a rhino. That's a joke. But I do think you got to be rooted in kind of the core conservative principles and values, because those are enduring truths. That doesn't change. Being a conservative, you're recognizing what our founding fathers recognized about our rights coming from God, not from government, about certain truths about liberty and the like. But I will say we have a corrupt and failed ruling class in this country. So the populist energy, which I channel too, because these people need to be taken out of leadership positions. These people in the big corporations, in big government, they have failed this country for 20, 25 years. And so we need new leadership up there. We have people in positions of power that don't care about the American people. They have their own agenda. So I think people rightly feel, wait a minute, who elected this ruling class to hover over us? Why don't we take power back from ourselves? Now that's within a conservative framework, but I do think we have, and it's Republicans and Democrats in DC, it's Republicans and Democrats in some of the big businesses, but they have not had the American people's interests at heart for far too long.
Our last question, is there anything you, if not regret, you look at this campaign and go, I wish I would have done that? How do you feel about that?
Well, there's always different things that happen. I would say if I could have one thing change, I wish Trump hadn't been indicted on any of this stuff. Honestly, I think that, from Alvin Bragg on, I've criticized the cases. I think, someone like a Bragg would not have brought that case if it was anyone other than Donald Trump. And so, someone like that's distorting justice, which is bad. But I also think it distorted the primary. And I think it's been that those have kind of been the main issues that have happened.
Because it's helped him, is that what you're saying? And so therefore
it's both that, but then it also has just crowded out, I think, so much other stuff, and it's sucked out a lot of oxygen. And so, some of these guys like Bragg, they abuse their power. Incidentally, he's a Soros-backed prosecutor. I'm the only one in the country. I've removed two, one from Tampa and one from Orlando, and it does show you that they view law as an extension of politics, and that gets very, very dangerous when this country goes down that road.
But that's interesting. You're saying it made him stronger in a way, and it made it tougher for you and others.
I think for the primary, it distorted. Yeah, I think it distorted. Now, in a general election, I think the Democrats have a plan on this. I think the media has a plan on this. And I think if it gets to the point where 6 months from now, Trump's the presumptive nominee and he's having to go through all this, they have a plan for how they're going to ride this out.
Because, the polls are showing a lot of this was about you or whoever. A lot of people are making the general election case, but Donald Trump's showing in 7 of these swing state polls that he is up by 3, 4, 5 points.
But when has he ever led in that? The media has never wanted to show him ever leading up until very recently. So why are they doing that? I think they're trying to create a narrative that scares Democrats to replace Biden and also tries to convince Republicans, go ahead and nominate Trump. I guarantee you 6 or 9 months later, those polls are going to look a lot different. The media will be putting out polls saying the exact opposite. And I'd also point out, remember, November of 22, there was supposed to be a red wave. If you looked at a lot of the polls,
Sure.
they were doing that. In Florida, I overperformed the polls. A lot of polls had me winning by 5 or 6 or 7. I won by 20. And so, these things have limited utility.
Okay, I said twice, I said last question. Literally, this is my last question, Biden impeachment. I had to get to it. I almost forgot. Is the evidence there? Do you think you should be impeached?
They should definitely do the inquiry.
So you're not quite there yet.
Well, no, I think what they're doing is appropriate. I think they need to get, continue to get more information. But I think the amount of money that's flowed into that family, to me, that is something that's probable cause to go forward. So I think going forward was the right thing to do.
A pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That was
Appreciate
great.
it. Yep. Thanks.